All right, John, you want to get us started?
Yeah, we are on. So this topic is personal to me as well. I don't know. I've always felt like I'm a people pleaser. I believe I had battle with people pleasing, but one of it as either as a part of this or as a separate category, when I feel like somebody's being critical of me, I get defensive real quick, and I don't usually like the way I respond. And I wonder if I'm being a little hypersensitive to people being critical to me as well. So I think the stuff that Rod's going to share today has the potential to help me in my marriage. It has the potential to help me in my meetings with people at church and just in general to be able to respond differently maybe than I have in the past. And I'm trying to learn to grow in this area. So thanks for being willing to help us be better listeners and deal with things that might trigger us in our response to that. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. As I said in the email, this is a relational skill that by and large, I feel like I was missing until I was first introduced in 2015 and did not receive the kind of healing that made me more fully aware of the ways in which I'm finding some success now. So in spite of the fact that I am hoping that I expressed more empathy, when in particular I was challenged or in conflict, I think that I definitely did not have an awareness of this issue of validation. I only had an understanding of as if I validated somehow it was affirming them. So I'll explain all that, but this was quite costly for me. And what I mean by that is not only relationally, but also financially, because I did some counseling about it in order to get help. And in addition to that, just the sort of the kind of the ways in which I had to keep unpacking layers of the onion in order to get to why this was so hard for me to engage. So I'm still very much a work in progress, but as a, but I hope it's helpful. So my wife was sitting with me in the sunroom, and of a summer, some years back, three years or so, she said to me, she said, "Do you think that you would be okay if we read a book on marriage?" And I said, with quite vehemently and angered, "Why would you think I wouldn't be willing to read a book on marriage? Have I not been a person who's cared about our marriage?" And that became the third of what became 5 specific arguments that I had with her related to what she called my defensiveness. So the way this would play out is that I would respond the way I did, and then she would say, "You just don't hear me. You're not able to hear me. This is kind of a pattern of yours. You need help with this. I've done all I know to do to say to you, this is an issue for you." And ultimately, that didn't get resolved until about 18 months later through a series of things that we did. Now, we did read the marriage book that she was talking about. And the book that we read was by Steve Call, entitled Reconnect, and a plug for the at TEI Missouri YouTube. The lunch and learn that we did with him sometime during my own processing about it on this book is there. And so you can go and reference that. Reconnect by Steve Call. He works with the Allender Center and teaches there, if you know that name, etc., and does work in the area of marriage with him. And he's the one whose counseling was so expensive that I spent some sessions with, frankly. So let me read how he talks about it in the book. Naming impact versus intent. Lisa, his wife, was recently away for the weekend with some friends. When Lisa and I are apart, we try to check in every couple of days or so as a way to stay connected. Lisa didn't call and I was bothered. If I'm honest, I was hurt. I started feeling insignificant and believing that Lisa was having more fun with her friends than she does with me. Instead of reaching out by giving her a call, I tried to manage the hurt by not engaging when she came home. When I heard the door open, I jumped up from the table and pretended to be busy cleaning the kitchen. She said hi and moved toward me to give me a kiss. I didn't respond. She tried again to connect. What's up? She asked me. Because my feelings were hurt, I blurted out, you never call me when you're away. This wasn't true. She immediately started to explain the reasons why she didn't call. I didn't have a cell charger. We stayed really busy. This is Rod, okay? I really didn't have a spare moment. Essentially, she was communicating that she hadn't intended to not call me. She was focused on intent rather than impact. For most of us, this response perpetuates disconnection. One spouse wants to explain and even justify their behavior, but for the spouse who's hurt, intent is irrelevant in the moment. When we hurt our spouse unintentionally, they long to know that we're aware of the impact and can hear it. Let me read that again. When we hurt our spouse unintentionally, they long to know that we're aware of the impact and can hear it without focusing on our intent. In other words, hearing impact is our priority over explaining intent. So this was my reality. Now, particularly for those of us who have a lot of positive flesh patterns, are you with me? Those of us who from young were spiritually inclined and sensitive and want to say yes to Jesus, then we take a lot of pride in the fact that the ways in which we're moving are to try to get along in the world, try to be with people. And in the process of doing so, therefore, when our intentions feel questioned, then we need to justify why we made the decisions that we did. And so I think this idea of not understanding impact or not validating impact or being with a person in terms of the impact keeps them from being able to hear from us because it creates the separation by which they don't feel heard. If for me, you back up the truck in 2015, I got a gift in a terrible package. And the gift was in a way in which, in addition to other circumstances, some of my peers who worked with me now had the opportunity to say to me, essentially, your listening skills suck. And it's been hurtful. And it was really hard for me to wrap my mind around. So in some sense, that was the first experience by which I became aware of what I now can name, which is validation is not the same as affirmation. It felt like anytime I would come alongside to sort of be with an individual, I needed them to understand desperately that I didn't intend to do harm. That wasn't what I wanted to do. And if I could tell you my intent, then you wouldn't feel the way you feel. And you feeling the way you feel makes me feel inadequate. And God help us if I feel insecure and inadequate. Now, let me take you all the way, because I know you probably can't relate, in spite of the wry smiles on some of your faces and the nods of your head. But just in case you could, let me take you all the way to where I had a breakthrough. It goes something like this. Post the counseling where I was trying to grow in awareness, my friend Clay is in the room, post a conversation with Clay in his faithful yard one day where he helped me navigate one of these situations by hearing from my wife and helping me to embrace. In the midst of reading this book, etc., it came to a head on the fifth argument that I had with my spouse. in that argument, at the end of it, Julie said to me, you know, Rod, these 4 questions might be helpful to you. And the questions were, number 1 is, what are you feeling? So I would take out a feelings chart. And I would name a feeling. And then number 2 is, when have you felt that before? So then I would go back into my childhood and look for an opportunity to sort of identify that same emotion and how it had surfaced in the past. Number 3, what did you come to believe? What did you come to believe about what you are feeling? In other words, what are you now saying to yourself about that experience? And then number 4, what would Jesus say to you about what you've come to believe? So what are you feeling? What kind of experience have you had in your past where you felt that before? And number 3, what did you come to believe about yourself as a result of those experiences? And number 4, what would Jesus say to you about what you've come to believe? This has been the case in my life where God sort of knows how to meet us individually. But if you live long enough, you'll see patterns. And a pattern for me has God waking me up in the night or early in the morning in inconvenient times. And it often happens in terms of threes. So I could tell you a half dozen stories about times in which they were very strategic times. And this happened to me in this, what I'm about to read to you from my journal on the 3rd morning. So 3 mornings in a row, 4 a.m., same time, basically. I'm now awake, sitting in my chair in the family room, working in my journal through these 4 questions. And on the 3rd morning, on a Saturday, this is what I wrote. What have I come to believe? You're lucky to have her. But what she really wanted was fill in the blank. A guy like that. Why would a girl like her want a scrawny, ministry-oriented kid like me? She's about to tell you what you've always known. Now, I've got these situations in mind where she's saying to me something along the lines of, you're not hearing from me. Would you be willing to read a book on marriage? What I'm hearing as, why don't you prioritize our marriage? Not what she's intending, what I'm hearing. She's about to tell you what you've always known. She wishes she had made the other choice. When Julie's unhappy with me, I'm at risk of hearing her say, I made the wrong choice, or I wish I had chosen differently. And my word, who wouldn't? Who would want to pick me for their team? Unless I justify that I'm a hard worker, committed, well-intentioned, committed, strong, studied, committed, sincere, helping, spiritually sensitive, committed, hard worker, a good pick. I think I'm a great pick, but I don't believe others / Julie thinks I'm the pick she wants to choose, not really. What would it take for me to be the first pick of choice? Use my words better. Make more money to provide. Be a better pastor. When you believe me to be unwilling, I'm at risk of your rejection. Whew. So when we talked that Saturday morning about 9 a.m., I was able to say to her, in the work that we've done, essentially, I think that my inability to be with you when my inability to validate is directly related to me feeling like I'm a second and third choice pick on a team. and therefore I'm needing to justify my existence. And that goes all the way back to a childhood experience that happened on a playground as one example, not to mention the fourth boy, fifth child of a busy pastor family, but on the particular playground, this represents my life until well into college, when I finally found something that I felt like I had some acumen and skill to do, is that they were picking teams for basketball, and Kirk stepped over in front of me as I was the next to last choice and said, "We'd just rather play a man down than have you on our team." And with that, I remember him pushing me in the chest and me falling back on my butt. I remember defending myself, at least this was positive, and I said, "I'm playing regardless." But it became sort of a theme in which I think you're lucky to have me on the team, but fundamentally, you're wishing that you had made another choice. And the ways in which I had applied that, both in my ministry life as well as in my married life, was really hindering me from being able to be present in the harm that my words and actions had caused. I did not have the ability to be able to give the benefit of the doubt when I was feeling that threatened at my core. And so as a result of that, since then, there have been times in which I have been hurtful, in which my actions have been met with, I don't think you're hearing me. Again, married and in life, relationally. And I'm growing in my capacity to regulate, to ask questions. I'm growing in my capacity to be able to say things like the sheet that I'm about to share with you, that's in front of you, to be with and to validate and to hold my intentions, to remind myself validation, relational presence, what God offers to us, to me, theologically speaking, where God doesn't like perhaps how, regardless of our intentions, God is with us first, and then also comes alongside with his corrections or his instructions or his beautiful grace. But validation is not affirmation. And I've grown in my capacity to be able to then be able to say, "Tell me more," or "Did I get it?" Or "Is this what I hear you saying?" And then some of the prompts that we got here. And then when that's wrapped up and the person feels heard and validated, witness happens, then I'm able to say back, "And could you hear from me?" And so to navigate the ways in which I also wanted to be heard or or what I did intend. And it's just made a huge difference. And it's something that back in 2015, I came to realize was hard. Now, I've sort of told this,
Can I,
please.
there's a lot here, so
Yep.
let me shrink it down in my brain for a second. So go back to that. Julie says, "Can we read a marriage book together?" Right? And your reaction came across defensive. I can definitely relate to that. So if we backed it up before you opened your mouth, right, you're saying it would have been helpful if there could have been this freeze in time and you would have stopped and said, "What am I feeling?" And your answer to "what am I feeling" would be, "I'm feeling attacked. I'm feeling like I'm a disappointment to my wife."
Yeah,
Is that
all
how
of
you would
that.
have answered that?
All of that. If I could say it a little differently, what I was in our marriage, particularly in the early years, we've navigated me having a mistress called the local church, or
Okay.
me being a pastor of integrity.
Right.
And so as a result of that, I was immediately hearing her say something along the lines of, "I have to compete with your pastoring work."
Okay,
and then the feelings that would come with that.
so you felt that, and then you would have continued that pause, and you would have thought, when have I felt this in the past? This feels like the bully pushing me down in the basketball court. And then you would have asked, how did I come to believe? What did I come to believe about what I'm feeling?
That's right.
What would your answer have been to that?
Yeah, my answer would have been is what I've come to believe about that is that
People don't pick me, and my wife's about not to pick me also.
if I don't meet this challenge, she's leaving me. I'm going to be abandoned.
Okay. I've got to rise up and I've got to perform.
My identity is that if I don't have a marriage, I don't have a ministry, which is a cliche, but it really means if I don't have a marriage, then ministry is going to look a lot different. I'm going to have to deal with the consequences of that.
Yeah.
But that has been a mantra. It's something I valued. And then there's the reality of my deficiencies in being able to make all that work.
Okay, and then you would have paused also to say, what does Jesus have
Yeah.
to say about that? And Jesus would have had to say what?
Yeah, and that's that, I don't know if I got there in my journal exactly as I was reading it. Because I'm feeling vulnerable right now and
Right.
Exposing my flesh patterns, my identity in it. But essentially, what I said to Julie on that Saturday morning at 9 a.m. was, I know Jesus is saying to me, hey, you're a first pick. I picked you.
Right.
But I went on to say to her, that's still in my head. And I need an experience. The way I know to say that now is what was implicit becomes explicit. And what's explicit needs to become an experience. And I would just say, what I said to her was, and I'm not there yet. And I don't know that I have the levels of experience that I hope to have, even up today. I can't, as we say, I can't give what I don't have. So therefore, I know the defensiveness, but at least I have the awareness of the issue.
Okay, so those 4 questions are good to, if we can pause.
Yeah.
Before we hit defensiveness. And now you're moving into questions that we could ask instead of jumping right to the defensiveness response.
You got it.
Okay.
So I've told sort of the healing part of the story, but what I've not done is say where it first started for me. So I worked with a staff member who still serves in Jeff City as a children's family life pastor. Her name is Karen Lauder, who some of you would know. And she sat in my living room in this season in which I was experiencing this hard season of ministry and being appropriately challenged on the ways that I had not been a skilled listener, which I then had the opportunity to own and apologize for and seek forgiveness. But for the first time, she sort of pointed at me, very gently pointed me towards these listening prompts. And suffice it to say that in the parsonage parenting that I grew up in, I had it until 6th grade, and at 6th grade, I was sort of on my own. Okay, so there's a sort of a secure attachment earlier on, and then there's like this figure it out, know what to do in my life. And she sat with me and said, as a teenager, you still needed help navigating some relational skills that you didn't get. And then in not this journal, but another one, I have it on my phone, she just listed out questions that she knew from her parenting skills in conscious discipline. In this case was her curriculum. Others of you would know it through things like connected family, etc. Is that there was this kind of emotional witness idea. And I have printed out for you what I did yesterday out of my handwritten notes. And so in the ways in which I have gotten better at this, in the ways I've grown in this, it's directly related to me saying to Julie or to a person who wants to navigate with me some conflict or hurt that they've experienced from the way I've presented myself, is that if they'll either let me grab my phone or open my journal, then I'll get in a better place than I will if I'm left on my own. So these questions, this journal, this is what I will pull up out of my album. I'll pull up these 2 pages that I wrote down in 2015, these kinds of questions. And these questions, these listening prompts will allow me to regulate long enough. They've expressed an offense. These questions will allow me to validate their experience, not affirm necessarily, but validate their experience. So let's just go through what's in front of you here. So one is just to be able to say for a while, even though I'm triggered, I'm holding, regulating. I hear you. I'm sure that was hard for you. If I had experienced me that way, this is key, I would highlight this one. If I had experienced me that way, I wouldn't have liked it either. You've asked me why I did that. Right now, I don't know. So again, let me pause. Back in 2015, as I was sitting in this experience where some of the staff with whom had experienced this lack of relational skill with me were expressing their disappointments to me, Karen had given me the ability to sit with these and then be able to have this kind of response rather than the one that was, well, let me tell you what I meant, or let me tell you why you shouldn't feel that way. Sounds like you place a high value on. Did I get it? Is that right? So essentially, some of you know the idea of who has the floor. What I hear you saying is, did I get it? Is there more? Allowing the person to feel heard before giving a response. So I have the floor there. Then back to the pose. I'm taking in what you're saying and asking God to use your pain to teach me. I can't do that, but what I can do is, now we're navigating some of the, you might say, stronger speaking into. I'm struggling right now. I don't think I can talk about it. Have you considered, listen to this, the way this kind of begins to say, have you considered other narratives? Because the persons may have been judging. See at the bottom? Judging is deciding a person's motivation without asking them. So therefore you turn, have you considered other narratives or possibilities of what I might have been feeling or experiencing? Again, you could feel the transition beginning to happen. I'll need to think about that. What would that have sounded like? In other words, can you be concrete, specific in what you think you would have liked to have heard from me instead? And then what do you think God's perspective is on this situation? Can you hear from me now? Here's what I was experiencing. I didn't like it when. What I'd like to say happened is. So this is a two-way street that if there's going to be reconciliation beyond validation, then 2 parties have to be involved.
Oh, yeah, I feel it moving as with some of those questions there. A question that I have is, well, I guess you just need wisdom in the moment, but what's the timing of, can you hear from me? Sometimes when I'm feeling attacked, or if I do think to use some of these questions instead of just trying to defend myself, is it the moment then also, or is it the next time we talk? When do you, is there a way, what are cues?
Yeah.
That would help you think that it might be okay for me to ask to be heard from also?
I just want to pre-qualify that this whole talk today, I mean, I think they call it pose. I feel like I'm posing,
right? Because
the people who are better at this are either in this room or not in this room, who have been my teachers. And so I'm growing in my capacity to name these things. So I am learning I'm sharing as a learner. But I now understand that if both of you have to be breathing, Like right now, I just went, oh man, my body's really anxious. My neck is pretty tight. So if you're not both breathing, then you both need to sort of take a break and walk around the house or walk around the room, come back in. So there's this physical respect that I, again, have significantly lacked awareness of. That would be a thing to know about timing. I think beyond that, it's just, the person being able to say, I feel heard.
Right.
Can you hear from me now, or do we need to come back to it? And so there's, in that sense, pacing. And again, I was in a hurry. If I had conflict with an individual, because my pace, because my work was demanding, because my family's, in other words, the ways in which I was overscheduled, in some sense, just continued to mean that I needed to have this conversation. And no matter how long it took, I did not want to come back to it. I didn't like the feelings that it presented, but in doing that, it just oftentimes created more mess, or the person never felt heard and therefore could not hear from me. Now, certainly I can only control me. And so therefore, even if I had done that well, if they still were refusing to receive me or to trust me or to forgive me, that would be me. That help?
Okay, yeah, and I got a question about what I have on the back of my notebook here. That I started a year ago. It just says, I put this statement, I can allow myself to be misunderstood, and it's okay to not correct false narratives that others may have. And when I feel that, I just put a tally mark there instead of trying to defend myself. And I have 5 tally marks in this notebook so far. So I'm just curious of your thoughts on the, sometimes I guess that's my feeling, like they probably don't get my motive, but am I just gonna trust God to defend me if I feel like I needed that defense? It's that defensiveness coming out in me.
Yeah, I love how you wrote that. As long as that doesn't mean that we didn't attempt to reconcile the hurt that was created. My hearing your motivations, you're hearing mine, my intentions, etc., and so that we can move forward.
Yeah.
But in the cases in which that can't happen, then we're left with the pain of that.